I let my old mentor use my studio after his gym closed, then found his secret plan to legally take over my business. My revenge was perfect. The day I got the keys to my own martial arts studio felt like a dream. Not just because I'd finally made it, but because I never thought I'd see the day. After years of hopping between gyms, teaching freelance classes, and crashing on friends' couches, I finally had something that was mine. A small, slightly beat-up space in a strip mall off Highway 43, but it was mine. My name's Liam. I'm 32 years old and I live in Everett, Washington. I've been teaching martial arts since I was 19. Not out of some movie-style calling or childhood dream, honestly. It started because I needed a job and my friend's uncle owned a dojo. But somewhere along the way, it stuck. And now, after nearly 15 years of scraping by, I put down every last dime I had and signed the lease on the old FitFlex studio that closed down last fall. I spent my first morning scrubbing mirrors, unrolling mats, and taking 100 slow walks around the space just to make sure it was real. When I hung my hand-painted Liam's Combat Studio sign in the front window, I stood outside for a solid 5 minutes just staring at it. That was the first time I let myself feel proud. Not lucky. Not relieved. Proud. That feeling lasted about 24 hours. I was rearranging the front desk when my phone rang. It was Troy. I hadn't heard from him in over a year. Troy was my old mentor. Mid-50s now, but back when I first started training, he was the guy in our area. Ran the biggest MMA school in the county. Gave me my first job. Even let me crash in his spare room once when I couldn't make rent. But he could be intense. The kind of guy who'd do you a favor and remind you of it every time you saw him for the next 10 years. I picked up, unsure of what to expect. Liam, he said, voice tight. I heard you finally got a place. That true? Yeah, I said, unsure if I should feel proud or defensive. Just sign the lease. He let out a rough sigh, like the sound someone makes when they're swallowing pride. Listen, my gym's gone. Bankruptcy. The landlord locked the doors yesterday. I sat down on a stack of old yoga blocks. I'm sorry, man. That sucks. Yeah, well, I'm trying to stay active. Keep teaching a couple classes, maybe private lessons. Thought maybe I could use your space. Just temporary. A few weeks, max. I didn't say anything right away. I should have. My stomach was already twisting. But Troy had taken me in once, and when he said, you know, I wouldn't ask if I had options, I heard the old guilt trip, all polished up and ready to go. Okay, I said finally. Just for a little while. Of course, he said, and I could hear the smile through the phone. Just until I find another place. You won't even know I'm there. But I already knew better. Troy never showed up without leaving footprints. Still, I told myself it was temporary. That I owed him one. That it would be fine. That was the lie I told myself as I unlocked the studio the next morning and found him waiting by the front door, gym bag in hand. Smiling like he'd never left. At first, it was fine. Better than fine, honestly. Troy showed up early, swept the floor without being asked, helped demo warm-ups during kids' classes. He had this way of slipping into a role like he never left it, like stepping back behind the mat was second nature. I caught myself thinking, maybe this won't be so bad after all. He even said thanks the first couple of days. Brought me a gas station coffee one morning, told a few of the younger students stories about back in the day when Liam was still tripping over his own belt. It was harmless stuff. And I guess part of me liked having him around. The guy taught me everything I knew. But then I started noticing little things. First, it was the gear. He brought in his old focus mitts and heavy bag. No big deal. I had extra space in the back room. But then he started rearranging the main mat, rolled up my grappling crash pad because it got in the way, moved the striking dummies to the back wall so he could hang his banner. Yes, a banner. An old vinyl one from his last gym. Troy Morris Martial Systems. I found it half unrolled in the corner and asked about it. Oh, that, he said, laughing. Just had it lying around. Might hang it for the Tuesday class. Branding, you know. It bugged me. But I let it slide. Then he started saying our dojo during class introductions. Not my studio. Our. I caught it the first time when he welcomed a couple walk-ins during a Saturday open mat. Thanks for checking us out, he said. We're building something special here. We? I tried to play it off, chalk it up to habit. But it didn't stop there. That week, I found flyers in the front desk drawer. Cheap glossy prints advertising Morris and Kane combat training. Real skills, real sweat. My name, next to his, in bold red letters. I hadn't agreed to that. I hadn't even seen the design. I waited until after the adult class to bring it up. Tried to keep my voice light. Hey, I said, holding up one of the flyers. Where'd these come from? He grinned. Ah, you found those. Just something I whipped up. Figured it'd help get more eyes on the place. Thought we could pull in some old contacts from my mailing list. You put my name on this, I said. Without asking. He waved a hand like it was no big deal. Relax, man. You act like I'm trying to steal your students or something. I'm helping you build the brand. My jaw tensed. Yeah, but it's my business, Troy. He chuckled, slapped me on the back. Exactly. You're the boss. I'm just giving you a boost. I stood there holding the flyer after he walked away, staring at the words like they might rearrange themselves if I waited long enough. Something felt off, but every time I tried to pin it down, it slipped through. He wasn't doing anything overtly wrong, just edging in, like a vine curling around something that wasn't his. I told myself it was stress, that I was being paranoid, that I owed him. I didn't sleep well that night. It started with a missing class ledger. I wasn't snooping. I was just trying to find the damn notebook where I tracked payments. I always left it in the same drawer of the front desk, but that day it was gone. I checked the shelf, the office cubby, even the lost and found bin. Nothing. Then I remembered Troy had used it to jot something down during Tuesday's sparring class. He kept his stuff in the utility locker in the back room, the one I'd originally cleared out so he'd have a spot for his gear. I hesitated at the door. I didn't like going through other people's things, but this wasn't personal. I was looking for my own records. That's what I told myself. The locker creaked open. Right on top was the ledger. But beneath it, there was a folder. A thick, worn manila one with the top corner curled like it had been stuffed and restuffed over time. I didn't mean to open it. I really didn't. But then I saw the tab, Business Docs Strategy. I slid it out, hands already sweating. Inside were typed legal templates, business partnership agreements, shared ownership declarations, letters of intent, and operating agreements. All filled out, names typed in, Troy Morris and Liam Kane. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. Some had scribbles in the margins. Notes like mention verbal partnership and consider use of equity share language. Others had entire paragraphs highlighted. One clause was underlined 3 times. An absence of formal documentation, proof of continued contribution, instructional, operational, or promotional, may constitute legal grounds for co-ownership claims. At the back of the folder were printouts of emails and texts, mostly messages between Troy and some of our mutual acquaintances. A few I hadn't talked to in years. I scanned the threads. Just a matter of time before the studio is ours. He's young, emotional, playing the long game. Once I've got 6 months of classes under my belt, we'll file jointly. No way he can say it was all him. He'll never see it coming. I read that last one twice. My fingers felt numb. I snapped a photo of every page. Quietly, carefully, I slid everything back into the folder, tucked it exactly where I found it, and shut the locker. I sat down on the edge of the back mat. The room felt colder somehow, like something had shifted in the air. All those little things, the banner, the flyers, our dojo comments, they weren't casual. They were calculated. I'd given him space, and he'd started planting flags. I thought back to when I was 19, crashing on his floor, cleaning his mats for free just so I could stay in the scene. He'd taken me in, sure, but he also used me. He'd always made it clear that I owed him. And now, he was calling in that debt in the dirtiest way possible. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest. I felt stupid, blindsided, angry. But more than anything, I felt sick. Not just because of what he was planning, but because I had let him get that far without noticing. I stood up slowly, turned off the lights, and locked the studio behind me. The next stop would be a lawyer. I made the appointment first thing the next morning. Found a small business attorney named Carla Reyes in Linwood, about 20 minutes from the studio. Her website said she specialized in partnership disputes and intellectual property for independent business owners. That was good enough for me. Her office was tucked above a print shop, nothing fancy. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh toner. When she called me in, she didn't waste time with small talk. So, she said, folding her hands, "Tell me what's going on." I laid it all out. How I'd opened the studio, how Troy came in after his own place went under, how he started bringing in gear, calling it our dojo, printing flyers with both our names. I told her about the locker, the folder, the documents and texts. I showed her the photos on my phone. Carla scrolled through silently, her brow furrowing deeper with every swipe. "Do you have a formal partnership agreement with this man?" she asked finally. "No," I said. Everything was verbal. He asked to teach a few classes while he looked for a new place. That's it. She nodded slowly. "That helps. But it's not everything." "What do you mean?" "In Washington state," she said, "a business partnership can technically be implied by behavior. If he's been contributing regularly, teaching, managing, helping with operations, and there's no clear contract stating otherwise, a court could consider him a partial owner." "But it's my business," I said, probably too sharply. "I paid for everything. The lease is in my name. I built the client base." "I get it, Liam. And that absolutely works in your favor. But you've let him operate inside your space for months without any written agreement." He could argue that he was a silent partner, building sweat equity. I sat back in the chair, jaw tight. "So what do I do?" "You draw a line," she said. Immediately, she pulled out a pad and started scribbling notes. "First, we'll draft a formal ownership declaration. It states that you are the sole proprietor, and that no co-ownership has ever existed. Okay. Second, you create a paper trail, emails, memos, whatever, that reinforce that he's a guest instructor. Nothing more. I nodded. Third, she continued, you update your LLC filings and reissue your business license under your individual name, if you haven't already. We want everything pointing back to you. I didn't say anything. Just let her keep writing. And finally, she said, meeting my eyes, you don't confront him until these protections are in place. If he thinks you're onto him, he could file first. Or worse, cause problems with your clients. I swallowed hard. Got it. She handed me a checklist and asked for a retainer. I paid it without blinking. As I left her office, a cold wind hit me in the parking lot. I stood there a moment, looking up at the gray sky. This wasn't just about a studio anymore. It was about ownership, boundaries, and finally, standing up to someone who had always made me feel small. This time, I was drawing the line. I waited until everything was in place. Took about a week. Carla helped me file the updated business license, and I got the new LLC paperwork stamped and finalized. I printed out notices for the wall, rewrote my instructor bios on the website, and emailed a revised welcome packet to every current student. Just a little update from Liam's Combat Studio, sole proprietor. No mention of Troy. I also changed the locks. Not to lock him out, not yet, but to make sure if things went sideways, I could. I even added cameras in the front room and lobby. Quiet little ones. Just in case. Once all the documents were in a folder in my bag, I told Troy we needed to talk. We sat across from each other on the front bench after Thursday's adult class. The mats were still a little damp from sweat, and the air smelled like Tiger Balm and detergent. I've been meaning to talk to you too, he said before I could start. That Thursday class, I've got 3 new students asking about it, thinking we bump it to 2 nights a week. I didn't smile. Troy, I said, how long have you been planning to stay here? He blinked. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. It's been over 2 months. When are you planning to find your own space? He leaned back like I'd insulted him. Well, that's out of nowhere. No, it's not, I said calmly. You told me it was temporary. But lately you've been calling this your gym, putting our names on flyers, hanging your banner. I'm just helping you grow the business. It's my business, I said. You don't get to call it ours because you hang out and teach a couple of classes. Troy stared at me, the smirk gone from his face. You serious right now? He said, voice getting sharp. After everything I've done for you? I stayed quiet. I gave you your first job, he went on. You lived in my house. You were a wreck back then, couldn't even run a warm-up drill without looking like a deer in headlights. That was 14 years ago. He pointed a finger. You wouldn't be here without me. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and set it on the bench between us. What's this? Proof, I said, of what you've been planning. He opened the folder. I watched the shift in his face as he flipped through the pages. Legal templates. Highlighted partnership clauses. Texts to former students about taking over the studio. He closed the folder slowly and didn't look at me right away. You went through my stuff. I found it when I was looking for the class ledger you took. So yeah, I looked. And I saw everything. He stood up abruptly, eyes flashing. You don't get it, do you? He snapped. This place exists because of me. Every skill you've got, I taught you. You think that's worth nothing? I think it doesn't entitle you to steal what I built. His voice rose. You think you're some big shot now, with your name on the lease and your shiny little LLC? I built fighters. I built you. You owe me a piece of this. No, I said, standing up to face him. I don't owe you anything. His jaw clenched. You're just a kid with a mat and a logo. I'm a business owner. And I'm telling you now, you've got 14 days to clear your stuff and find another gym. He stared at me like he didn't believe I'd really said it. You're kicking me out, he said, like it was unthinkable. I'm reclaiming my space. He laughed once, bitter and ugly. You'll regret this. I didn't say anything, just turned and walked toward the front door. As I reached it, I said over my shoulder, start packing. Clock's ticking. I locked the door behind me, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Troy didn't leave. 14 days came and went. He still showed up like nothing had changed, rolled in early, taught his Tuesday class, nodded at parents like he owned the place. When I reminded him of the deadline, he just smiled and said, we'll talk. Like this was a negotiation. It wasn't. So I made it official. I emailed him a formal eviction notice. Gave him 72 more hours to clear out his stuff. Carla helped me word it in airtight legal terms. I posted a copy on the inside of the studio office door. Then I changed the locks. This time for real. And that's when things got ugly. Troy started calling mutual friends, former instructors, people we knew from back when I was just starting out, guys from the tournament scene, old coaches, gym rats who hadn't seen me in years. He's kicking me out of a studio I helped build, Troy told them. He's trying to erase everything I did for him. Wouldn't even have a black belt if it weren't for me. Within a week, the calls started rolling in. Hey, Liam, what's going on with Troy? I heard you're pushing him out. That true? I mean, you gotta admit, he kind of made you. The worst part? Some of them believed it. A couple even called during class hours, asking why Troy wasn't listed on the website anymore. One guy, a mutual connection named Russ, straight up told me I was burning bridges with the people who made you. I kept my answer short. I told them it was a business decision. I didn't explain the documents, the folder, the months of slow, calculated encroachment. Most people wouldn't understand, or didn't want to. Meanwhile, Troy's behavior at the studio turned strange. He'd pace the lobby before classes, staring at the flyers I replaced. One day, I caught him muttering under his breath while rearranging the gear rack, like he couldn't believe it was happening. Then came the sabotage. He started forgetting to clean up after his sessions. Left trash under benches, stacked mats lopsided. He unplugged the lobby camera one evening, didn't say a word. Another time, he reset the thermostat to 80 degrees before a kid's class. The studio smelled like a locker room before the warm-up even ended. I logged every incident, took photos, wrote everything down, and then I had the locks changed again, this time while he was out of town for a weekend seminar. That Monday, he showed up banging on the door 15 minutes before my first class. "Open up, Liam," he shouted through the glass. "This isn't over." I didn't answer. I had 2 moms in the lobby and 3 kids tying their belts. I just walked over and calmly taped a copy of the eviction letter to the window. He read it, eyes narrowing. Then he stormed off, muttering something I couldn't hear. I turned back to my students and smiled like nothing happened. But the tension didn't go away. Rumors spread through the local martial arts circles. Troy posted a cryptic rant on his Facebook page. "Sometimes your students grow up and forget who gave them everything. Loyalty is dead." A few of our shared contacts liked it. One even shared it. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not even when someone forwarded me a screenshot of Troy calling me a snake in a black GI. Instead, I secured the studio. I installed 2 more cameras, set up cloud storage, scanned every legal form, and backed them up on 2 drives. I made sure Carla had everything. Troy could rant all he wanted. I had the law on my side, and more importantly, I had truth. He wanted a war. I was giving him paperwork, and I wasn't backing down. The final showdown came on a rainy Wednesday. Troy showed up again, this time with a duffel bag and a chip on his shoulder, and tried to walk right in like nothing had changed. Only now, I had a camera rolling in the lobby and a printed log of every time he'd ignored the eviction notice. When he yanked the handle and found the door locked, he pounded on the glass hard enough to make 2 kids jump mid-drill. I stepped outside. "Back away from the door," I said. "You're not allowed in here anymore." He sneered. "This is how you do it? Hiding behind locks and lawyers." I didn't respond. Just held up a folder with the latest cease and desist letter. Carla's name in bold. Certified mail receipt stapled to the front. "This is all documented, Troy. Don't make it worse." "Worse?" he barked, arms wide. "You've already ruined me." He stepped closer. "You think that paper means anything to me?" And right then, just as he started raising his voice again, 2 uniformed officers pulled into the parking lot. Calm. Quiet. Exactly like I requested when I filed the trespass report last week. One of them stepped out and gently took Troy aside while the other nodded at me. "We got your paperwork," the officer said. "It's all legit." I watched from the studio doorway as Troy argued for a few minutes, voice pitching higher, hands waving. Then the duffel hit the ground, and he shoved his jacket into the passenger seat of his truck in a way that made it clear this was over. When the cops told him to leave the property for good, he cursed under his breath and peeled out of the lot, tires skidding against wet pavement. Just like that, he was gone. I didn't celebrate. I just walked back inside and got ready for class. The next few days were quiet, until they weren't. Troy, apparently, had time on his hands. He lit up every local martial arts forum he could find, spinning stories about how I stole his client base, hijacked his dream, disrespected a mentor who built him from the ground up. He even posted a screenshot of our old Facebook banner from before I rebranded, the one that still had both our names. But he made one mistake. He lied. And I had proof. I uploaded a short video to my studio's social media page. Just 2 minutes. No names. No drama. Just me explaining the importance of boundaries in business and how clear documentation protects small studio owners from unauthorized partnership claims. I ended it with, "Our space is built on honesty, safety, and respect. Anything less doesn't belong here." I didn't have to name him. People knew. Then something unexpected happened. A respected instructor from another school, a guy who didn't take sides easily, commented publicly, "I've known Liam for years. One of the most ethical people in the game." Others followed. Parents shared testimonials. Students messaged support. Even a few of the folks Troy had tried to turn against me quietly unfollowed him and reached out. Within a week, Troy's post stopped. His page went dark. I filed one last cease and desist letter through Carla, just to close the loop, and updated every legal document to reflect my ownership, new logo, new structure. By the time the month ended, the studio was mine again, in name, in spirit, in peace. No more shadows. No more borrowed time. Just me, the mat, and the silence after the storm. Troy was gone, but the damage lingered. The studio felt quieter now, even when it was full. No more tension in the air, no more passive-aggressive comments, no more walking in every morning wondering what boundary he'd try to test next. But what lingered was more subtle, the questions, the loyalty divides, the silences that didn't used to be there. Some folks left. Not many, but enough that I noticed. A couple of longtime students who'd known Troy from way back said they were taking a break. One guy who used to clean mats on Thursdays ghosted without a word. I'd scroll through social media and see familiar names still liking Troy's cryptic posts. The kind of half-allegiance people cling to when they don't want to pick a side. It bothered me more than I expected. Not because I needed everyone to defend me, but because I finally understood how easy it was for people to rewrite the story when they weren't around for the hard parts. And some just didn't want to know. But the ones who stayed? They asked the right questions. They checked in. One parent pulled me aside after a kids' class and said, "We're with you, Liam. You handled that like a pro." I nodded, smiled, said thank you. But it was hard to shake the feeling that some part of me was still rebuilding. Not just the business, myself. Then one night, after a Tuesday teen class, I got a message from someone I hadn't talked to in years. Her name was Kendra. She'd trained with me years ago, back when I was still under Troy's roof, when I was fresh off my second degree test and still figuring out how to lead. She had dropped off the radar after an injury, but apparently she'd heard what happened. Her message was short. "Hey, I heard about the Troy situation. Just wanted you to know. He did the same thing to me back in 2015. Tried to push me out of teaching, claimed I owed him. Thought I was the only one. We met for coffee that weekend. Talked for hours. She shared stories that mirrored mine, the guilt-tripping, the power plays, the way he framed his generosity as ownership. It was like looking in a mirror I didn't know I needed. That conversation sparked something. I ended up talking to 3 more people, all former students of Troy, each with a version of the same experience. Over time, a little network formed. Nothing official. Just shared validation. Mutual understanding. And somewhere in those conversations, I started to heal. I also started therapy, something I'd put off for years. I always thought I didn't need it. But sitting in that office, talking through how I'd let someone walk all over my boundaries because I thought I owed them, hit harder than I expected. Turns out, what I'd been calling loyalty was actually fear. Fear of being ungrateful. Of being seen as selfish. Of not measuring up to someone who made me feel small on purpose. Troy had taught me martial arts, but he never taught me respect. That had to come from me. Week by week, class by class, I started feeling like the space was mine again. The students felt looser. The parents more relaxed. My voice didn't shake when I stood at the front of the room anymore. I still had scars, not the kind you see, but the kind that tighten when old memories flare up. But I also had something new, the freedom to set boundaries without guilt. And that, I was learning, was the real black belt test. It didn't happen all at once. The studio didn't magically fill with new students. My name didn't suddenly carry weight in the broader martial arts scene. The damage Troy caused, the doubts he planted, the reputational bruises, those didn't vanish overnight. But slowly, things started to shift. I rebranded first. New logo, new signage, new tone. Liam's Combat Studio became Kane Martial Arts. Clean. Direct. Mine. I swapped out the old color scheme, ordered fresh uniforms with a new crest, and redesigned the website from scratch. No more shared credits. No more legacy names from Troy's era. I hired an assistant instructor, a guy named Deshaun, someone I'd trained alongside years ago before he moved south. He'd just come back to Washington and was looking for something steady. Professional, good with kids, and most importantly, he respected boundaries. We sat down over coffee, and I told him everything, the Troy mess, the legal work, the fallout. He didn't flinch. "I'm not here to run the place," he said. "I'm here to make it better." And he did. We started splitting youth classes, ran a couple co-taught seminars, and even launched a women's self-defense series that filled up within 2 weeks. People noticed. Then, without me trying, the community started shifting too. A local magazine did a feature on small business owners and recovery from partnership disputes, and Kane Martial Arts got a 2-page spread. The article included a line that stuck with me. Liam Kane built his dojo twice, once with sweat, and once with courage. It got passed around more than I expected. Even brought in a few new students who said they admired how I handled that situation. No one needed to say Troy's name. We all knew. Life outside the gym got better too. I started dating again. Her name was Riley, a trauma nurse who took no crap and laughed like she meant it. We met at a friend's birthday dinner and talked until the restaurant staff had to ask us to leave. On our second date, she asked what happened to my last business partner. I didn't lie. She nodded once. "Good. You learned where your lines are." That's rare. She didn't try to fix me. She just stood beside me, which, I was realizing, is what respect actually looks like. We built a rhythm. She'd stop by the studio after late shifts. Sometimes she'd bring takeout. Sometimes she'd just sit and watch the last few rounds of sparring, I was quietly tracking the flow. One night she brought cupcakes with Team Kane written in frosting. The kids thought it was hilarious. So did I. 6 months after Troy's last visit, I stood on the back deck of the studio, the one that overlooks the parking lot, and that I'd never bothered to fix up, and looked out over the rows of cars. Half the class had just finished sparring, and the kids' parents were chatting outside under the lights. Deshaun was sweeping the mat inside. Riley was leaning against the doorway, watching. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tense. I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged. I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from finally walking away from the fight you were never meant to stay in. I'd lost some people, but I'd found my footing. The studio was mine again. My life was mine again. And for the first time, that was more than enough.